Hello, welcome to the channel.
I stood at the edge of nothing. Not darkness, not silence, not even emptiness, because emptiness implies a space that could be filled. No, this was before space itself existed, before time had learned to tick, before light had a name or shadow had a shape. And then I heard it, a voice, deep, immeasurably deep, like thunder folding in on itself a billion times over. It didn't come from anywhere, because there was no anywhere. It just was. And the voice said one word, one single word that changed everything that would ever be. Light. And I swear to you, what happened next, no human tongue can describe it properly. But I'm going to try, because this story, the one I'm about to tell you, is the reason you exist, the reason you breathe, the reason you cry at night and laugh in the morning, the reason you feel that strange pull in your chest when you look at the stars and wonder if someone is looking back. This is the story of how everything began, and how it all went wrong. Let me take you back. When the light exploded into being, it wasn't gentle. It wasn't some soft golden sunrise creeping over a hill. It was violent, raw, like a roar made visible. It tore through the void, and the void screamed, or maybe it sang. I still can tell the difference. And the one who spoke, the one whose voice had no beginning and no end, he looked at that light and he separated it from the darkness. Just like that. Like pulling apart two threads tangled together since before forever. He called the light day. He called the darkness night. And that was just the first breath. On the second day, and I say day loosely because time was still finding its legs, he split the waters. I know that sounds strange. Waters above and waters below. A great expanse stretched between them. A dome of sky so vast your mind would crack trying to hold it all at once. He wasn't building a house. He was building a cathedral. No. Something bigger. He was building a stage. A stage for the greatest drama ever told. By the third day, dry ground pushed up from under the seas, like bones rising through skin. Mountains cracked the surface. Valleys yawned open. Rivers carved their paths as if they already knew where to go. And then he whispered something to the soil, and the soil obeyed. Green burst out from every direction. Grass, trees, flowers with colors that don't exist anymore. Fruits so heavy with sweetness the branches bent like they were bowing. You ever walk through a forest after rain? That smell. Multiply it by infinity. That's what the world smelled like on day 3. Day 4. He hung the lights. Not lamps. Not fixtures. He placed the sun. A furnace of fire so large you could swallow 1,000,000 earths inside it and still have room. And the moon, pale and silver, a quiet mirror reflecting borrowed glory. Then the stars. Oh, the stars. He scattered them like a man tossing seeds into a field, except each seed was a burning world, each one placed with precision, each one singing a frequency only he could hear. I want you to understand something. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't anxious. He was enjoying it. Every detail, every shade, every ripple. This wasn't labor. This was love. Love pouring itself out into form and matter and color and sound. Day 5. The waters churned and life exploded beneath the surface. Great whales, silver fish darting in schools so thick the ocean turned to mercury. Creatures with teeth and tentacles and scales that shimmered like oil and water. And above, the sky filled with wings. Eagles and sparrows and things that have no names now because they vanished long ago. The air was thick with the sound of beating wings and the ocean hummed with 1,000 different songs. And he looked at all of it. Every fin, every feather, every jaw and claw and gill. And he said it was good. Day 6 came. And this is where the story gets personal. Because on day 6, he didn't just speak, he knelt down. I need you to picture this. The creator of the universe, the one whose voice built galaxies, bent low. He reached into the dust, the red clay, the earth that he had called into being just days before. And with his own hands, he shaped something new. Not a mountain, not a river, not a beast with claws. A man. He shaped the jawline, the fingers, The ribs. The curve of the spine. He pressed the dust together and sculpted something in his own image. His own likeness. Not a copy. A reflection. Like looking into a still pool and seeing yourself staring back. But alive, breathing, capable of things even the angels couldn't do. And then he leaned close. So close his face was inches from the dust-formed face of this new creature. And he breathed. Not spoke. Not commanded. Breathed. The breath of life. Warm. Intimate. Personal. And the man opened his eyes. His name was Adam. And the first thing Adam ever saw was the face of God. Can you imagine that? Your first heartbeat. Your first breath. Your first moments of consciousness. And you're staring directly into the eyes of the one who made the stars. No fear. No confusion. Just pure, overwhelming, unfiltered connection. God placed Adam in a garden. Not just any garden. A garden called Eden. And Eden was not like anything you've ever seen. The rivers ran with water so clean it tasted like joy. The trees bore fruit that satisfied not just your stomach but your soul. There were animals everywhere. Lions lying next to lambs. Wolves playing with deer. No predator. No prey. Just harmony. A living, breathing masterpiece. And God walked with Adam. Walked. In the cool of the evening, they would stroll together through the garden. And God would show him things. Name this, he'd say. What do you want to call that one? And Adam would name the creatures, one by one, and God would smile because this was the point. Partnership. Relationship. A father watching his son take his first steps and cheering. But there was one thing Adam didn't have. And God knew it before Adam did. Adam was alone. Not lonely the way you get when no one texts you back. Alone in a way that echoed. In a way that the animals couldn't fix and the beauty couldn't fill. There was a hollow space inside him, shaped like something that didn't exist yet. And God said something that night. Something that might surprise you. He looked at everything he had made. The light, the oceans, the mountains, the stars, the beasts, the man. And for the first time, he said something was not good. It is not good, he said, for man to be alone. And what he did next, what he built next, would become the most beautiful and the most dangerous thing in all of creation. But I'll tell you about her in a moment. Because what's coming, you're not ready for it yet. Nobody ever is. God put Adam to sleep. Not the kind of sleep you fall into after a long day. Not the restless, tossing kind where your mind won't shut up. This was deep, surgical, like sinking into warm water that holds you so gently you forget you have a body at all. Adam didn't fight it. He didn't even know what sleep was. He'd never needed it before. But when God's hand touched his forehead, his eyes closed and the world went quiet. And then God opened him up. He reached into Adam's side, past the skin, past the muscle, down to the bone. And he pulled out a rib. One single rib, still warm, still carrying the echo of Adam's heartbeat. And from that fragment, that small, curved piece of bone, God began to build again. But this time, it was different. When he made Adam, he used dust, common dirt, ground that had been walked on, rained on, forgotten. But for her, he used living material. He used something that had already been breathing, already been loved, already been close to his own breath. He wasn't starting from scratch. He was refining, elevating, taking what was already good and making it stunning. He shaped her slowly, every detail deliberate. The arch of her brow, the curve of her neck, fingers thinner than Adam's but just as strong, hair that caught the light like water running over dark stone. And her eyes, I wish I could tell you what color they were, but no word in any language has ever been invented to describe it. They were the kind of eyes that made you feel seen, not observed, not watched, seen, down to the marrow. When God finished, he didn't breathe into her the way he did with Adam. He didn't need to. She already carried the breath. It was woven into the rib, passed from Adam like a flame jumping from one candle to another. She was alive the moment God's hands released her. Standing there in the garden, the breeze moving through her hair, her chest rising and falling with that borrowed, beautiful breath. And then God woke Adam up. I want you to picture this carefully. Adam opens his eyes. He's groggy. His side aches in a way he's never felt before. He reaches down, touches the place where the rib used to be, and something is missing. Something that was part of him is gone. And for a split second, just a flash, he feels that hollow space inside him widen. Then he sees her. She's standing a few feet away, and the evening light is catching her skin, and the garden behind her is blooming as if the flowers themselves are trying to get closer to her. And Adam, the man who named every creature on earth, who had a word for everything, opens his mouth, and all that comes out is a sound. Not a word. A sound. Like the air had been punched out of him. And then he says it. The first poem ever spoken by a human being. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He didn't say she was beautiful. He didn't say she was useful. He said she was him. Part of him. The missing piece he didn't even know how to look for. And in that moment, something clicked into place in the universe, like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting since before time began. God looked at them standing together, Adam and Eve, side by side, fingers not yet touching but close, so close, and this time, he didn't just say it was good. He said it was very good. They lived in Eden the way you live in a dream you never want to end. They ate when they were hungry, and every fruit was sweeter than the last. They explored the rivers and named the flowers and ran barefoot through meadows so thick with life that every step was a conversation with the earth. They didn't wear clothes because they didn't need to, not because they were naive, because there was nothing to hide from, no shame, no secrets, no walls between them or between them and God. Every evening, God came. You could hear him before you saw him. The sound of his footsteps on the garden floor. The way the air changed when he was near, heavier somehow, warmer, like the whole world leaned in to listen. And they would talk, not about rules, not about duty. They would talk the way a father talks to his children, about what they'd seen that day, what made them laugh, what amazed them. But there was one rule, one. In the center of the garden stood two trees. The first was the tree of life. Its fruit glowed faintly, even in daylight, and its roots went so deep they touched the foundations of the earth. You could eat from that tree freely. It was a gift, like everything else. But the second tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that one was different. Its branches were darker, not ugly, not sinister, just heavy, like they carried a weight the other trees didn't. And the fruit on that tree was perfect, flawless. The kind of fruit that catches your eye and won't let go. God had been clear, crystal clear. You may eat from any tree in the garden, he told Adam. Every single one, but not that one. The day you eat from that tree, you will die. That was it. No long explanation, no lecture, just a boundary. One line drawn in the dirt of paradise. Every other square inch of this infinite garden was theirs. Every river, every hill, every fruit-bearing branch bending under the weight of sweetness. All of it, free. Just not that one tree. And for a while, it was enough. Adam and Eve would pass by it sometimes. They'd glance at it the way you glance at a locked door in a house you love. Curiosity, maybe. But not hunger. Not yet. They had everything. Why would they want the one thing they couldn't have? But here's what I need you to understand. And this is important because it changes everything. That comes next. The garden wasn't a cage. God didn't put a fence around that tree. He didn't station an angel with a flaming sword in front of it. Not yet. He gave them the command, and he gave them the freedom to obey or disobey. That's what love does. Love doesn't lock you in a room and call it safety. Love gives you the key and trusts you with it. And that trust, that terrifying, beautiful, fragile trust, was about to be tested. Because something else lived in the garden. Something that had been watching. Something that had been waiting. Patient. Quiet. Coiled like a spring in the tall grass. with eyes that reflected no light and a voice smoother than silk dipped in honey. The serpent. Now let me be honest with you. The serpent was not what you think. Forget the cartoons. Forget the red devil with horns and a pitchfork. The serpent was beautiful, cunning, more clever than any other creature God had made. The text says it plainly. He was craftier than all the beasts of the field. Not dumber, not clumsy, crafty. And he had a question. Just one question. That's all it took. He didn't come to Adam. Think about that. He didn't approach the one who had heard the command directly from God's own mouth. No. He went to Eve. And he waited until she was near the tree. Maybe she was passing by. Maybe she had wandered there out of habit. Maybe some small part of her had been circling that tree for days without realizing it. And when the moment was right, when the light was soft and the garden was quiet and Adam was nowhere in sight, the serpent opened his mouth. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? That's it. That was the weapon. Not a lie. Not yet. A question. A seed of doubt planted so gently she didn't even feel it going. And what Eve said next, what she added, what she changed, what she didn't realize she was doing. That moment right there is where the crack appeared. A crack so small you could miss it, but wide enough for everything to fall through. I'll tell you exactly what she said. But not yet. Because the words that came out of her mouth next are the most dangerous words ever spoken by a human being. And you need to hear them slowly. Eve looked at the serpent. She wasn't afraid. Why would she be? She had never encountered a lie before. She didn't even know what deception was. In her world, words meant exactly what they said. Water was wet. Fruit was sweet. God was good. Nothing had ever twisted in front of her. Nothing had ever worn a mask. So when the serpent asked that question, did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? She didn't flinch. She didn't back away. She answered. But here's where it starts to unravel. Listen carefully. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden," she said. "But God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden. And you must not touch it, or you will die." Did you catch it? Did you hear what she added? God never said don't touch it. Go back. Read it again. He said don't eat from it. That's all. But somewhere between hearing the command and repeating it, Eve added a word, a restriction God never gave. You must not touch it. And that might seem small, a tiny addition, an innocent exaggeration, but it reveals something enormous. It tells you that the command had already started to feel heavy. It tells you she had already begun to see God's boundary, not as protection but as restriction. She was already reframing the gift as a cage, and the serpent saw it. He saw the crack, and he drove straight into it. "You'll not certainly die," he said, flat, calm, confident. No hesitation, no stammer. He contradicted God to her face and didn't even blink. And then he did something even worse. He gave her a reason. For God knows that when you eat from it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. You hear that? He didn't just deny the consequence. He reframed the motive. He turned God's protection into God's jealousy. He said, God isn't protecting you. He's hoarding. He's keeping the best thing for himself. He doesn't want you to be equal. He wants you beneath him. And I need you to feel the weight of that, because this is the oldest trick in existence. And it still works today. Every single day. Someone whispers in your ear, you deserve more. You're being held back. The rules aren't for your safety. They're for someone else's control. And suddenly the boundary feels like a chain. Suddenly the gift feels like a prison. Suddenly the one who gave you everything looks like the one who's keeping you from something. Eve stood there. The serpent's words hung in the air like smoke, and something shifted behind her eyes. Something that had never moved before. She looked at the tree. Really looked at it. And for the first time, she saw it differently. The fruit was beautiful. She had always known that. But now it wasn't just beautiful. It was desirable. There's a difference. Beauty you can admire from a distance. Desire pulls you forward. Desire closes the gap between looking and reaching. And the text tells us 3 things she noticed in that moment. 3 things, stacked like kindling before a fire. The tree was good for food. It was pleasing to the eye. And it was desirable for gaining wisdom, body, beauty, power. The same 3 hooks that have caught every human being since the beginning of time. Nothing has changed. The packaging is different, billboards instead of branches, screens instead of serpents, but the architecture of temptation hasn't moved an inch. In all of history, she reached out. And I want to stop here, because everyone rushes past this moment. Everyone jumps to the bite. But the reach is where the war was lost. Because between the wanting and the taking there is a gap. A tiny gap. A breath. A heartbeat. A space where you can still pull back. Where you can still hear the echo of what you were told. Where the voice of the one who loves you is still louder than the voice of the one who wants to destroy you. Eve didn't stop. Her fingers closed around the fruit. It was warm, heavier than she expected. The skin was smooth and tight, like it had been waiting for this exact hand at this exact moment. She brought it to her lips, and she bit. The juice ran down her chin. Sweet, impossibly sweet. And for 1 second, maybe 2, nothing happened. The sky didn't crack. The ground didn't shake. She didn't drop dead where she stood. And in that silence, in that brief pause between action and consequence, the serpent's words seemed true. You will not certainly die. See, he was right. Nothing happened. But something had happened. Something invisible. Something so deep inside her that she wouldn't understand it for years, for centuries, for millennia. The link had been cut. Not the physical one. Not her body. Something else. Something between her and the voice that had breathed life into her bones. A cord she didn't even know existed had been severed, and the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was absence. She turned to Adam. And here is the detail that haunts me more than anything else in this story. The text says she gave some to her husband, who was with her. With her. He was there. Standing right there. He heard the serpent. He watched the conversation. He saw her reach for the fruit. And he said nothing. The man who had been given the command directly. The man who had walked with God in the cool of the evening. The man who had named every living creature and stood as guardian of the garden. He stood in silence while everything fell apart. Why? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. Was he curious too? Was he afraid of losing her? Was he testing God the way a child tests a parent? Pushing the boundary just to see if the wall is real? I don't know. The text doesn't say. It just says he ate. He took the fruit from her hand and he ate. And that's when it hit them. Both of them. At the same time. Their eyes were opened. But not the way the serpent promised. Not like waking up to a beautiful morning. It was like waking up in a stranger's house. Everything was the same. The trees, the rivers, the flowers. But it all looked wrong. Distorted. Like someone had tilted the whole world 3 degrees and nothing lined up anymore. And the first thing they saw, the very first thing, was themselves. They were naked. They had always been naked. But they had never noticed before, because nakedness without shame is just existence. You don't think about the air you breathe until it's gone. You don't think about your body until someone teaches you to be ashamed of it. And now, standing in the garden that was made for them, surrounded by the beauty that was built for their joy, they looked at each other, and for the first time they wanted to hide. They grabbed fig leaves, broad, rough, green. They sewed them together, and I use the word sewed loosely because these weren't clothes. They were bandages, frantic, clumsy coverings slapped together by 2 people who had just discovered a wound they couldn't name. They covered themselves and they backed away from each other, and the distance between them grew in ways that had nothing to do with feet and inches. Then the evening came, the air cooled, the shadows stretched, and from somewhere in the garden, from the direction they used to run toward, they heard it. Footsteps. God was coming. Not in anger. Not yet. Not with thunder or lightning or the terrible weight of judgment. Just footsteps. Steady. Patient. The same footsteps they had listened for every evening since the beginning. The sound that used to make Adam's heart leap. The sound that used to make Eve smile before she even turned around. But tonight, that sound did something it had never done before. It made them afraid. And they ran. Not toward him. Away. Deep into the trees. Behind the bushes. Into the shadows they had never needed before. To people hiding from the one who could see through mountains. To children crouching in the dark, holding their breath, pressing their fig leaves against their skin, as if leaves could hide what had already been broken. And then God's voice came through the trees. Quiet. Not shouting. Almost gentle. A question he already knew the answer to, but asked anyway. The way a father asks a child standing next to a broken vase, "What happened? Where are you?" 2 words. The saddest 2 words in the history of language. Not because God didn't know where they were. He knew exactly where they were. He had known before they ran. He asked because he wanted them to say it. He wanted them to come out on their own. He wanted them to choose honesty. The way he had once hoped they would choose obedience. And what Adam said next, the first excuse ever spoken by a human mouth, told God everything he needed to know about what had changed. But those words, Adam's answer from behind the trees, you need to hear them in full, because they set the pattern for every broken relationship, every cover-up, every blame game that has echoed through human history ever since. And that pattern starts right now. Adam's voice came out thin, shaking, like a rope pulled too tight and starting to fray. "I heard you in the garden," he said, "and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Afraid. That word had never existed between them before. It had no history, no context, no place in the vocabulary of Eden. Fear was a foreign language, and Adam had just spoken his first sentence in it. And notice what he said. He didn't confess. He didn't say, "I ate the fruit." He didn't say, "I disobeyed you." He said, "I was afraid." He described the symptom without naming the disease. The way a man clutches his chest and says, "I don't feel well," instead of saying, "I think my heart is stopping." God didn't shout. He didn't strike the ground. He asked another question. Calm, measured, like a surgeon pressing gently on a wound to find where the damage is deepest. "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Who told you? Think about that. Nakedness wasn't a discovery. It was a revelation. Someone had to redefine it. Someone had to take something that was innocent and twist it until it became shameful. And God knew exactly who. But he wasn't asking for information. He was giving Adam a chance. A door. An exit. All Adam had to do was walk through it. All he had to say was yes. "I did it. I'm sorry. Help me." He didn't. Instead, Adam did something that has been repeated by every human being in every century in every corner of the world ever since. He pointed his finger. "The woman you put here with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Read that again. Slowly. Because there are 2 blames packed into one sentence. First, he blamed Eve. "She gave it to me," as if her hand on the fruit excused his mouth choosing to bite. But then, and this is the part that stops me cold, he blamed God. "The woman you put here with me, you did this. You gave her to me. If you hadn't made her, I wouldn't have fallen." The man who had looked at Eve and called her bone of his bone was now using her as a shield. The gift he had wept over was now the excuse he hid behind. And God turned to Eve. "What is this you have done?" Not what happened. Not explain yourself. What is this you have done? Present tense. Active voice. Ownership demanded. And Eve, standing there with juice still drying on her fingers, leaves pressed against her skin, her husband's accusation still ringing in her ears. She did the same thing Adam did. She passed it down. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." At least, she was closer to the truth. She named the deception. She acknowledged she was tricked, but she still wouldn't own it fully. The serpent deceived me, as if deception removes responsibility, as if being fooled means you didn't still choose. She reached, she took, she bit. The serpent handed her the match, but she struck it herself. And now God turned to the serpent. No question this time, no chance to explain, no door left open, because the serpent hadn't been deceived. The serpent knew exactly what he was doing, and God's voice, which had been quiet, measured, almost tender with Adam and Eve, changed. It dropped. It thickened. The air in the garden went still the way air goes still before a storm splits the sky. Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. Cursed. The first curse ever spoken in creation, aimed not at the humans but at the deceiver, the serpent, who had walked upright, who had been beautiful and gleaming and proud, brought low, stripped, reduced to crawling through the dirt he once stood above. And then God said something that echoed forward through every century that followed, a promise hidden inside a punishment, a seed buried in the wreckage. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. He will crush your head. There it is. Right there, in the ashes of the first sin, God planted the first prophecy. A child would come, born of a woman, and that child would destroy the serpent. Not without cost. The serpent would strike his heel, wound him, make him bleed. But the crushing blow would land on the serpent's skull. Death for death. Pain for pain. But one would get back up, and the other wouldn't. Nobody standing in that garden understood what that meant. Not Adam. Not Eve. Not even the serpent, who coiled tighter at the words but couldn't decipher their full weight. But the promise was made, sealed, spoken into the fabric of a broken world like a thread of gold stitched into torn cloth. And centuries later, millennia later, that thread would pull tight and the whole tapestry would finally make sense. But that moment was far away, and the consequences were right here. God turned back to Eve, and his voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't vindictive. It was heavy, like a father reading a sentence he didn't write but can't erase. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. The partnership, that perfect, equal, side-by-side design, cracked down the middle. What was meant to be unity would now be struggle. What was meant to be harmony would now be a constant negotiation of power and longing, and misunderstanding. The fracture didn't just run between humanity and God. It ran between man and woman, between the two who were made to be one. Even love, especially love, would now carry thorns. Then God turned to Adam. Because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Dust you are, and to dust you will return. There it was, the sentence. Not immediate death, not the lightning bolt, not the instant collapse they might have expected. Something worse. Slow death. Gradual decay. The body that was made to live forever would now wind down like a clock, with no one left to turn the key. Adam would work. He would sweat. He would fight the ground that once obeyed his touch. And at the end of it all, he would lie down in that same ground and become part of it again. The sculptor returning to the clay. The garden was quiet after that. The kind of quiet that hurts. The animals didn't move. The wind didn't blow. Even the rivers seemed to slow, as if the water itself was mourning. Adam and Eve stood there, stripped of everything except each other and the thin, ridiculous fig leaves that couldn't cover what was really exposed. Their innocence, their trust, their direct line to the voice that had made them, gone. But then God did something that nobody talks about. Something buried in the wreckage that I almost missed the first time I heard this story. Something that, when you see it, changes the way you understand everything that follows. He made them clothes, not fig leaves, not bandages slapped together in panic. God took animal skins, which means something had to die, something innocent had to bleed, and he fashioned garments for Adam and Eve, with his own hands, the same hands that shaped Adam from dust, the same hands that built Eve from bone. Those hands now sewed coverings for the two people who had just betrayed him. He clothed their shame. He didn't ignore it. He didn't pretend it wasn't there, but he covered it, at cost, at blood. And if that doesn't wreck you, if that image doesn't crack something open in your chest, then you haven't been paying attention, because right there in the 3rd chapter of the 1st book, is the entire story. Every sacrifice, every altar, every lamb led to slaughter, every drop of blood spilled on every temple floor for thousands of years. It all traces back to this moment, God covering the guilty with the death of the innocent. But even mercy had a limit. Not because God's love ran out. It didn't. It never does. But because the garden couldn't hold them anymore. Not like this. Not broken. Not with the tree of life still standing in the center, its fruit still glowing, still offering what it had always offered, eternal life. Because if Adam and Eve ate from that tree now, in this state, they would live forever. And living forever in a broken state isn't paradise. It's prison. And what God did next, the decision he made to protect them from a fate worse than death, is the part of this story that most people misunderstand completely, because they think God threw them out in anger. But that's not what happened. Not even close. God walked them to the edge of Eden, not dragging them, not shoving them forward with his voice like a whip at their backs. He walked with them, the way he had always walked with them, side by side, through the garden they had named and loved and called home, past the rivers that still run clear, past the trees still heavy with fruit they would never taste again, past the animals who watched with eyes that didn't understand why everything felt different, but knew somehow that it did. And I need you to sit with that image because it will save you from the greatest lie ever told about God, that he is distant, that he is cold, that when you fail, he turns his back and locks the door and throws away the key. No, he walked them out. Every step was a goodbye. Every step was a wound. And if you think it only hurt Adam and Eve, you haven't understood who God is. It hurt him too. You ever had to discipline a child you love? You ever had to say no to someone not because you wanted to, but because letting them continue would destroy them? That tight feeling in your throat, that burning behind your eyes, that war between your heart and your responsibility, multiply that by infinity. That's what the walk to the edge of Eden felt like for the one who planted it. They reached the boundary, the place where the garden ended and the world began. And beyond that line, the world looked different. Not evil. God had made it all. And the bones of beauty were still there. But harder, rougher. The soil was thick with stones. The sky had clouds that weren't just for shade anymore. They carried storms now, real ones, with thunder that shook the ground and rain that came sideways and cold that bit your skin, until your fingers went numb. Adam looked back. I'm sure of it. The text doesn't say it, but I'm sure of it. Because who wouldn't? Who could walk away from the only home they'd ever known and not turn around for one last look? And what he saw when he turned, what burned itself into his memory and stayed there until the day he returned to dust, was fire. God placed cherubim at the east of Eden, not the soft, chubby angels you see on greeting cards. Cherubim, massive, terrifying, wings that stretched wider than the oldest trees, eyes that saw in every direction at once, and between them a flaming sword, not held in a hand, flashing, turning, alive, a blade of fire spinning in every direction, guarding the way to the tree of life. The door was closed, not forever, but for now. locked shut with fire and guided by beings whose very presence made the air hum with a frequency that rattled your teeth and made your knees buckle. Adam and Eve couldn't go back, even if they wanted to, even if they crawled on their knees and begged. The way was sealed. And here is where most people stop the story. Here is where the sermon ends and the congregation goes home feeling guilty and heavy, and vaguely afraid. The fall, the curse, the exile, humanity broken, door locked. End of chapter 3. Close the book. But that's not where the story ends. That's where it begins. Because what happened outside the garden, in the wild, in the thorns, in the sweat and the bleeding and the slow grinding weight of a world that no longer cooperated, that's where you see what Adam and Eve were really made of. And more importantly, that's where you see what God was really up to. Eve became pregnant. Think about that. The first pregnancy in human history. No mother to call. No midwife to guide her. No book, no tradition. No one to say, this is normal. This is what happens. This is how it feels. Just her body doing something it had never done before. Stretching and shifting and aching in ways she couldn't predict. And Adam beside her. Useless in the way men have always been useless in that moment. Wanting to help but not knowing how. Watching her pain and remembering God's words. With painful labor you will give birth. And feeling the full weight of those words land on his chest like a stone. The baby came. A boy. And Eve held him against her skin. Wet. Screaming. Alive. And she said something extraordinary. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. With the help of the Lord. She still believed. After everything. After the fruit and the shame and the exile and the angel with the burning sword. After losing paradise. After watching her husband blame her, and then watching herself blame the serpent. After all of it, she looked at her newborn son and she credited God. Not bitterly, not sarcastically. She saw the child as evidence that God was still present, still helping, still involved in her story even though the setting had changed. She named him Cain. Then came another son, Abel. 2 boys. The first brothers. The first family outside of Eden. And if you're hoping this is where things get better, if you're waiting for the upward turn, for the redemption arc, for the moment when humanity dusts itself off and climbs back toward the light, I need to warn you. It gets darker first. Much darker. Because the fracture that started with a piece of fruit was about to tear through flesh and bone and blood. Cain worked the soil, like his father, hands in the dirt, fighting the thorns and thistles, dragging food from a ground that resisted every effort. Abel kept flocks, sheep, mostly, quiet animals with trusting eyes that followed wherever he led. Both of them brought offerings to God. This detail matters because it shows you something crucial. Even after the fall, even after Eden, the relationship between humanity and God wasn't over. It was damaged. It was strained. But it wasn't dead. They still came to him. They still brought gifts. They still wanted to be seen by the one who had walked with their parents in the cool of the evening. Abel brought the best of his flock, the firstborn, the fattest, the ones that cost him something to give up. He didn't bring the runt or the sick one or the one he wouldn't miss. He brought the one that hurt to release. And God looked at Abel's offering, and he was pleased. Cain brought some fruit of the soil. Some. Not the first. Not the best. Just some. And God looked at Cain's offering, and he was not pleased. Now before you think God was being unfair, before you side with Cain the way so many people do, I need you to understand what was really happening. This wasn't about vegetables versus meat. This wasn't God playing favorites with food categories. This was about the heart behind the hand. Abel gave from his best because he believed God deserved his best. Cain gave from his leftovers because he believed the act of giving was enough, regardless of what it cost him. And God saw the difference. He always sees the difference. You can fool everyone around you. You can make the gesture, check the box, show up on time with the right face and the right words. But the one who formed your heart before you took your first breath, He doesn't look at the offering. He looks at the hands that hold it. And he knows, he always knows, whether those hands are open or clenched. Cain was furious, not sad, not reflective, not humbled, furious. His face fell, his jaw tightened. Something dark moved behind his eyes like a cloud crossing the sun, and the temperature around him dropped. He looked at Abel, his brother, his blood, the boy he had grown up beside, and something curdled inside him, something that tasted like the fruit his mother had eaten years ago. Familiar, sweet at first, then bitter, then poison. God saw it happening, and once again, just like in the garden, he came to the one who was falling, not to condemn, to warn. Why are you angry? God asked. Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Sin is crouching at your door. That image, a predator, low to the ground, muscles coiled, eyes locked on its target, waiting for the door to open, waiting for the moment of weakness. And God told Cain, plainly, directly, without metaphor, you can beat this. You must rule over it. The choice is yours. The door is still closed. You can still walk away. Cain heard every word, and he ignored them all. He turned to his brother. He said something. The text says he spoke to Abel, but it doesn't tell us what he said. That silence haunts me. What do you say to someone right before you do the unthinkable? Do you make small talk? Do you pick a fight? Do you say let's take a walk, just the two of us, out into the field where no one can see? They went into the field together. And what happened in that field? What Cain did with his bare hands under an open sky in a world that was barely a generation old. That moment cracked the earth in a way that has never healed. But the blood that hit the ground that day didn't just stain the soil. It cried out, and what it said, what it demanded, changed everything. The blood hit the dirt, and the dirt remembered. This was the same ground God had knelt in when he shaped Adam. The same soil that had cradled the first man before breath filled his lungs. It knew the taste of life. And now, for the first time, it was swallowing death. Abel's blood seeped into the earth, and the earth did something no one expected. It screamed, not with a voice you could hear with your ears. Deeper than that. A vibration that moved through the roots of every tree, and the bones of every mountain, and the bed of every river on the planet. A sound that only God could hear. And he heard it immediately. He came to Cain, not with fire, not with angels, not with the ground splitting open to swallow the murderer whole. He came the way he always came, with a question. Where is your brother Abel? The same kind of question he asked in the garden. Where are you? Where is he? Not because he didn't know, because he wanted Cain to say it, to name what he had done, to stand in the wreckage and own it the way his father never did. God was giving him the same door he gave Adam, the same exit, the same chance to fall on his face and say, I did it. I'm broken, help me. And Cain looked at God, the creator of the universe, the one who sees through mountains, the one who had just warned him minutes or hours or days ago that sin was crouching at his door. And he lied. I don't know, he said. Am I my brother's keeper? The arrogance of it stops my breath. Adam at least stammered. Adam at least tried to explain. He hid behind excuses, but he didn't deny reality. Cain stood there with his brother's blood still wet on his hands, and looked God in the face, and shrugged. Am I my brother's keeper? As if Abel was a stray dog, as if responsibility was a joke, as if the one asking didn't already know exactly where Abel's body was cooling in the field. And God's voice changed. Not louder, lower. The way a river gets quiet right before the waterfall. The way the air goes still right before lightning finds the ground. What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth, driven from the ground, The very thing Cain had built his identity on, working the soil, pulling life from the dirt, was taken from him, not just made harder the way it was for Adam. Taken. The ground would refuse him now. He could dig and plant and water and beg, and the earth would give him nothing. The thing he loved most became the thing that rejected him most, and that's not cruelty. That's consequence. You used the ground to grow an offering you didn't care about. You soaked the ground with your brother's innocent blood. Now the ground is done with you. And for the first time, Cain felt something. Not guilt, not yet, maybe not ever, but fear. Raw, animal fear. The same fear his father had felt in the garden, but magnified. Because Adam was afraid of being seen, Cain was afraid of being alone. My punishment is more than I can bear, he said. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Hidden from your presence. Even Cain, even the first murderer, even the man who lied to God's face, understood that the worst part of the punishment wasn't the wandering, it was the separation. Being cut off from the voice, from the footsteps in the evening, from the presence that made the air warmer and the world make sense. He could survive the thorns. He could survive the hunger. But the silence, the absence of God, that was the thing that would hollow him out from the inside. And here is where God does something that should stop you in your tracks. Something that makes no sense if you believe God is just a judge keeping score on a ledger. Something that only makes sense if the story is bigger than punishment, bigger than justice, bigger than what any of us deserve. God marked him. Not a scar. Not a brand of shame. A mark of protection. God said, if anyone kills Cain, they will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And he put a mark on Cain, the murderer, the liar, the man who had just destroyed the first innocent life on earth, so that no one who found him would kill him. Mercy. Unearned. Undeserved. Given to the worst person alive at that moment. Not because Cain earned it. Not because he repented. He didn't. He never said sorry. He never fell on his face. He complained about his punishment and worried about his safety and never once mentioned Abel's name. And God protected him anyway. Why? Because the story isn't about what we deserve. It never was. From the very beginning. From the breath in Adam's lungs to the skins that covered their shame to the mark on the murderer's brow. The story has always been about a God who refuses to let go, who keeps reaching into the wreckage, who keeps covering, who keeps marking, who keeps walking toward the ones who are running away. Cain left. He went east of Eden, further from the garden, further from the presence, deeper into the wild. He built a city. He had children. He started a civilization built on the foundation of blood and denial. And the world he built, the world we inherited, carries his fingerprints everywhere, in every act of violence, in every shrugged shoulder, in every "Am I my brother's keeper?" spoken by someone who knows exactly where the body is. But Eve, and this is the part of the story that keeps me breathing, Eve didn't stop. She had lost everything. Her home, her innocence, her firstborn son to murder and her second son to death. The 2 boys she had carried and nursed and watched take their first steps. One was dead and the other was gone. She had every reason to collapse, every reason to curse the day she reached for that fruit, every reason to look at the sky and say nothing, to go quiet, to let the grief eat her alive. She got pregnant again. She had another son. And she named him Seth. And the name means granted or appointed. Because Eve said, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. In place of Abel. Not a replacement. You can't replace a child. Every parent who has ever lost one knows that. But a continuation. A refusal to let death have the last word. A stubborn, bleeding, impossible act of hope in a world that had already proven how cruel it could be. And from Seth, from that line, from that thread of persistence, came generation after generation, men and women who called on the name of the Lord, who remembered the garden even though they'd never seen it, who passed down the story, the voice, the breath, the fruit, the fall, the blood, the mark, around fires and in tents and through floods and famines and wars. They kept the story alive because the story was the only thing that explained the ache every human feels, the one you feel right now if you're honest, the sense that something is missing, that the world is beautiful but broken, that you were made for something more but you can't quite reach it. That ache has a name. It's called Eden, and it's not just a memory, it's a promise. Because remember what God said in the garden to the serpent, on the worst day in history, he will crush your head. Someone is coming, through Eve, through Seth, through the long, winding, blood-soaked line of human history. Someone is coming who will finish what started in that garden, who will take the fruit of death and turn it into the bread of life, who will walk into the darkness not to escape it, but to swallow it whole. And the serpent, ancient, patient, called in the shadows of every century, knows it too. He's been watching the line, watching every child born, waiting, wondering, is it this one? Is it him? Not yet, but soon. The footsteps are already echoing, and this time, they're not walking through a garden, they're walking toward a cross, and the ground that drank Abel's blood is about to drink something else, something that won't cry out for vengeance, it will cry out for mercy, and when it does, the sword at Eden's gate will finally stop turning, the cherubim will step aside, and the way back to the tree of life, the one that's been waiting since the beginning, will open, not because we earned it, not because we crawled back on our knees and proved ourselves worthy, but because the one who walked us out of the garden never stopped walking toward us. Never. Not for a single second in all of history. And he never will. Thousands of years passed after Eden. Thousands of years of the same pattern repeating. Humanity reaching for what it shouldn't. God reaching back anyway. Floods and covenants. Altars and ashes. Prophets screaming into the wind and people covering their ears. The line of Seth stretched forward like a river that refused to dry up no matter how many droughts tried to kill it. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, name after name after name, each one carrying the weight of that first promise. He will crush your head without fully understanding what it meant. And then, in a town so small most maps didn't bother including it, in a stable that smelled like hay and animal sweat and damp wood, a girl who had never been with a man held a baby against her chest, and the sky above Bethlehem cracked open with light, not the light of the first day, something quieter, something that didn't roar. It hummed, like a frequency the whole universe had been tuned to hear, but had forgotten how to listen for. Shepherds fell on their faces. Angels filled the air with voices that sounded like thunder folded into music, and the baby, small, wrinkled, crying the way all babies cry, opened his eyes for the first time, and just like Adam, the first thing he saw was his father's face. But this time it was different. This time the father wasn't breathing life into dust, he was wrapping himself in it. The one whose voice built galaxies had squeezed himself into 6 pounds of flesh and bone and blood. The hands that shaped Adam's jawline were now the size of walnuts, curled into fists, grasping at the air. The mouth that spoke light into existence was now searching for milk. They named him Jesus, Yeshua. It means God saves, not God judges, not God punishes, not God keeps score. God saves. The name itself was the mission statement. He grew up, quietly, in a nothing town in a conquered country, under the boot of an empire that didn't care about profits, or promises, or ancient gardens. He learned to work wood with his hands, the same hands that had once worked dust. He ate bread and drank water, and slept and woke and walked dusty roads in sandals that wore thin. He was fully human, fully. He got tired. He got hungry. He wept. He laughed. He knew what it felt like to stub his toe and burn his finger and miss someone who was gone. But he also knew things no human should know. He looked at people and saw past their skin, past their smiles, past the masks they'd been wearing since the garden. He saw the fig leaves. Every single person he met was still wearing them. Different materials now, better stitching, more sophisticated designs. But fig leaves all the same. Covering, hiding, pretending the wound wasn't there. And he started pulling them off. Not with force, with words, with stories, with questions that landed like arrows in the center of your chest and stayed there 4 days. He told a religious leader that he needed to be born again, and watched the man's face collapse in confusion. He told a woman at a well that he knew about her 5 husbands and watched her drop her jar and run into town screaming that she'd found the Messiah. He touched lepers. He ate with traitors. He let a prostitute wash his feet with her tears and didn't flinch. The religious establishment hated him. Of course they did. He was dismantling everything they'd built, their rules, their hierarchies, their carefully constructed system of who was in and who was out. He walked into their temple and flipped their tables and called them whitewashed tombs. Beautiful on the outside, full of dead bones within. He didn't whisper it. He shouted it. In public. With witnesses. They wanted him dead. And here's the part that will either break you or save you, depending on how willing you are to hear it. He knew. From the beginning, he knew. Before Bethlehem, before the stable, before Mary's arms, he knew how the story ended. He knew about the nails. He knew about the wood. He knew about the darkness that would fall at noon on a Friday, and the cry that would tear itself from his throat like something being ripped out by the roots. He came anyway. The night before it happened, he knelt in a garden. Another garden. Not Eden. This one was called Gethsemane. And it was dark and cold, and the olive trees twisted overhead, like old men frozen mid-prayer. And he prayed. Not calmly. Not serenely. The text says his sweat fell like drops of blood. His body was shaking so hard the ground beneath his knees was wet. And he said something to his Father that echoes the original tragedy in reverse. If it is possible, let this cup pass from me. If there's another way, if the door can open without this key, if the price can be paid with something other than everything I am, please, please. Silence. The garden was quiet. Just like Eden after the fall. Just like the field after Abel's body hit the ground. That same terrible silence that means God is not absent. He's present, and the answer is one you don't want to hear. But not my will, yours. Adam reached for the fruit and said, my will be done. Jesus knelt in the dirt and said, your will be done. The first Adam broke the world with his choice. The second Adam would mend it with his. Same structure. Opposite direction. One man reaching for what he wanted. Another man releasing what he wanted. And the hinge of all human histories swung on that single sentence spoken in the dark by a man who was about to die. They arrested him that night. One of his own friends sold him for silver, 30 pieces, the price of a slave. They dragged him through mock trials and spit in his face and beat him with fists and rods, and whips tipped with bone and metal that tore his back into ribbons. They stripped him naked. Naked. Like Adam. Like Eve. Exposed before the world with nothing to cover him. No fig leaves. No animal skins. Nothing. And then they nailed him to wood. Wood. From a tree. Do you see it? The tree in the garden that brought death. And now a tree cut and shaped, and raised on a hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull. They drove iron through his wrists and his feet, and they lifted him up between heaven and earth. And he hung there, bleeding, suffocating, every breath a war against gravity and agony. The sky went dark, not cloudy, dark. At noon, the sun refused to watch. The earth shook. The ground that had drunk Abel's blood and cried for justice, was now drinking different blood, blood that cried for something else entirely. And from the cross, through cracked lips and a throat scraped raw, Jesus said 7 things, 7 last words, but one of them answers everything. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Forgive them, not destroy them, not curse them, not the humans you put here with me. They did this. No blame. No deflection. No finger pointed anywhere except inward, taking it all, absorbing every drop of poison that had been circulating in the bloodstream of humanity, since a woman bit into a piece of fruit in a garden that no longer existed. He died. The creator of life died. The breath that filled Adam's lungs breathed its last, and for 3 days, the world sat in the same silence that followed the fall, the same emptiness, the same gutted, hollowed out feeling that something essential had been removed from the center of everything. But on the 3rd day, on the morning of the 3rd day, the stone moved, not cracked, not pushed, rolled, like someone inside had simply decided it was time to leave, and the tomb was empty. The burial cloths were folded, not thrown aside in haste, not scattered in panic, folded neatly, like a man who had finished a meal and placed his napkin on the table to say, "I'm not done. I'm coming back." He walked out of the grave the way he once walked through Eden, upright, breathing, alive. The wounds were still there, the holes in his hands, the gash in his side, but they weren't bleeding anymore. They were open, visible, not hidden, not covered, displayed, as if to say, look at what it cost. Look at what love looks like when it refuses to let go. And the serpent, ancient, cunning, coiled in the shadows since the beginning, felt the crush. The heel had been struck. The cross was real. The pain was real. But the head, his head, had been broken. The promise made in Eden, whispered over the wreckage of the first sin, had landed. Thousands of years late by human counting, right on time by God's. The cherubim sheathed their swords. The flame at Eden's gate flickered and went still. The tree of life, patient and glowing and waiting since before the fall, stood ready. Not in a garden this time. In a city. A city described at the end of the story. The very last pages, where a river runs clear as crystal down the middle of a golden street, and the tree grows on both sides. Its leaves for the healing of the nations. No more curse. No more thorns, no more sweat, no more dust returning to dust, no more hiding behind fig leaves or blame or silence, no more locked doors. The way back is open, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it sounds too good, too clean, too easy. After everything, after the fruit and the murder and the flood and the exile, and the centuries of wandering, it can't be this simple. And you're right. It isn't simple. It cost everything. It cost a garden. It cost a son. It cost blood on wood and darkness at noon and a cry so raw the earth itself split open at the sound of it. But it is free. That's the part that wrecks me every time. The price was infinite and the offer is free. You don't climb back to Eden. You don't earn your way past the cherubim. You don't sow better fig leaves or bring a bigger offering or wander long enough in the wilderness to prove you've suffered sufficiently. You just turn around. That's it. You stop walking east, away from the garden, away from the presence, deeper into the wild, and you turn around. And when you do, you'll find that he's already there, already walking toward you, already carrying the clothes he made to cover your shame, already speaking your name the way he spoke it before you were born, before you reached for the thing that broke you. Before the ground drank what it was never supposed to drink. He's been walking toward you since the beginning. He never stopped. And right now as you hear these words, wherever you are, whatever you've done, however far east of Eden you think you've gone, he's asking you the same question he asked in the garden. The same 2 words. Quiet, patient, full of everything he is and everything he's done and everything he still wants to do. Where are you? He already knows the answer.
Thank you.
He just wants you to come
Bye-bye.
home.